let's start with that. Can the Eagles still win without Nick Sirianni at the helm?
I think so. I mean, we talked about that Giants game a few weeks ago up in the Meadowlands, and they just didn't perform at a high level regardless. I think Ciriani being there obviously helps. You want to have your head coach, but this is a game the Eagles should still win. I know you were down on, Saturday or Tuesday night at the game, so I'm sure it was a pretty cool experience, a random Tuesday game. But as far as this Giants game goes, you're not going to have Daniel Jones to deal with, and he's going to be out probably the rest of the season with that neck injury. So you're dealing with Mike Glennon, who we all know is a backup by trade, never was a starter, probably never will be. But going forward here this Sunday, as far as Coach Sirianni goes, I don't know what the game script is going to be as far as who's going to take over the reins. I think it was the offensive coordinator is now going to be the interim head coach for one game until Sirianni's healthy and back on track post-COVID. But I think the game plan remains the same as far as the rushing attack. We saw that Miles Sanders, 18 carries, Jordan Howard, 15 carries. I expect something similar on Sunday for that to happen. Jalen Hurts continuing to run the football as well. But when you talk about the game plan offensively, I don't think anything should change there because it just worked out. I think the Giants' defense isn't that much more superior to the Washington front. I think probably the Washington defensive front is better, to be honest with you. So from a game script and a game plan, you should expect to see Hurts maybe throwing the ball around 20 times, possibly 25, and then still having that rushing attack be the main focus.
Yeah, could you say that last game against the Giants was sort of a fluke? You go into how Jalen Hurts performed, and the Eagles just dropping a game they definitely should have won. Or are you sort of still going into this one unsure of how the Eagles will play, if they'll win or lose? Because I've heard some bold predictions about this game.
Yeah, with the Eagles, you probably are always going to, me, you're always going to have question marks with this team because there's no consistency
Yeah.
with it. Like, I didn't really feel, and I'm sure you probably felt the same way, confident in that Tuesday game. Even though they're starting a third string guy that just got called up from the practice squad, this Eagles team, the last few seasons, nothing has gone according to plan for the most part. In certain situations, games they should lose that they win, games that they win that they should lose, or I guess trying to give an example, like the Saints without Kamara earlier this year, a game that was up in the air. You really had no idea which way it was going to go. And, luckily the Eagles pulled that one out. And then you have this Giants game we just mentioned where you're going up, you're not getting on a plane. There's no jet lag or anything like that. You're playing a weaker opponent. Even though it's in their place, Eagles fans travel well, and we weren't able to get the job done. So I think with this game coming up back at the Linc, I know you're going to be there again probably with the season tickets, so I'm sure that experience is a lot of fun.
No doubt I'll be sitting next to a few Giants fans.
Yeah, exactly. They always make the trip down, so it's going to be a lot of fun. But at the end of the day, when we talk about, and I know we're going to get into this probably shortly, about these other teams, I heard you mention that at the beginning, the Vikings, the Saints are still in the mix after they just beat Tom Brady somehow and shut him out. It's not going to be easy, but you got to like the teams that are on the schedule here the rest of the way, these last 3 games.
Yeah, you definitely do, because I like to think that the Eagles have their fate in their own hands. I know definitely looking at other NFC teams that are still in the hunt, you of course, if you're an Eagles fan, you root for those teams to lose. But, I mean, the Eagles have it right here. If you go ahead, you beat the Giants, a game you should win, and you go ahead and you beat a Washington team again, then you play a Dallas team that's really they've already won the division. Um, and they should be resting a few of their starters at least. But this is the NFC East. Anything could happen with teams just playing harder. Spoiler, and inter-division matchups. But let's talk about Garrett Gilbert's performance real quick, because this was only his second NFL start, and last start he threw for over 240 yards against the Steelers, almost upset the Steelers. But in this game, 194 yards, 20 completions out of 31. He didn't throw an interception, no passing touchdowns either. But this is a quarterback, once again, just his second start in the NFL. And he played the way he did. In the beginning, I mean, he was playing better than Jalen Hurts. Does that worry you about the defense, or was it just because it's a Tuesday night and you go on and you got to get your feet back in the ground, and you got to get working, because the second half of this game, I mean, you look at the score, 27-17. It wasn't that close of a game if you were there watching the second half.
Yeah, real quick, Coop, I'm definitely slacking on the hair today. So obviously, I'm not the best hair day, but from this standpoint of this game in the very beginning, you're down 10-0. You mentioned that, but Gilbert, the quarterback that they had starting, looked decent early on. I mean, and you're thinking, oh, we're down 10-0. This game's going to get out of hand. But we're able to shut Antonio Gibson down, who I thought is one of their better players, to hold him to only, I think it was 26 yards rushing on about 14 or 15 carries. That's impressive in itself. Terry McLaurin's their number one target, 2 catches for 51 yards. I mean, he didn't really hurt the Eagles as far as scoring a touchdown or any big kind of volume when you talk about getting those near 10, maybe 8 to 10 receptions that he probably should be getting, but he didn't. And then you talk about offensively able to just turn on the Jets and start picking things up, especially in that second half. But to the quarterback, I actually think he didn't play poorly, because this is a guy who was just called up. I think it was 48 hours prior to the game, to the active roster. And I think I heard a story, he was, his playing with his kid, and his wife came into the room and said, you have like 20 missed calls. And he gets called up and he's thrust in playing in that road environment, Philly, one of the most, one of the tougher places to play. So from his performance, 21 of 31, he didn't look like he was too scared of the moment. He went out there and just tried his best. But when you're given that short amount of time playing on a road in that kind of environment, I mean, this game the Eagles should have won. They needed to win, and they did get the job done. And when we talk about where we thought this team was going to be at this point in the season, they're kind of right in the thick of things for that last wild card spot.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, going to Jalen Hurts' performance, picking it up in the second half, what are we thinking about Jalen Hurts now, Max? I mean, I've been trying to get you on the wagon this whole season now.
Yeah.
Are you, are we straying away from the wagon still, or are you thinking about hopping on?
I think where you're looking at his performances lately, I mean, I would be an idiot to say he's not been solid. I don't want to throw out all these excuses where, he's still not a great passer. They're running the ball heavy. The defenses hasn't been great that he's played. These teams are weak. You have the Giants defense and you got the Jets defense. I know he didn't play in that game, but as far as the Eagles go, winning games, and then Washington with all those COVID issues and everything like that. So listen, he's playing well. He's getting the job done later on the season. Coming off that, listen, we both know he looked pretty healthy, right? You were there. You saw it. He didn't look like that ankle was causing him too many problems as far as being able to perform at a high level. But no, I mean, going forward, look at the draft. And I know people are going to say, oh, Russell Wilson's available. Aaron Rodgers is available. There's weaker positions on this team that need to be taken care of in this draft with these top picks. We put it out the other day. You saw it. The Eagles are now going to have that third first-round pick from the Colts due to Carson Wentz playing that 70 or 75% of the games or snaps for the season. So you're going to take those picks and you're going to use them to your advantage, whether it be bolstering the offensive line, more linebacker help, and things like that. So, yeah, I expect Hurts to be the starter here next year. I think he's earned it, not by just a record, but just his progression. You've seen improvement over the season. But, again, it's really going to matter as far as opinions will sway one way or another if the Eagles make the playoffs or not, and that's where they're at right now.
Yeah. You know what, Max? I love this time of year, football season wise. Also, mention the holidays coming up too.
Yeah.
But football really heats up at this time. The weather's getting colder. But I mean, the division rivalry, and a lot of the NFL is in division football now,
Right.
playing in their big playoff implication games. You go back to the game on Tuesday night. Washington shipped out their own benches to the
Yeah.
Linc. That was a different move. I mean, the Dallas Cowboys against Washington, they brought their benches too. But I mean, we said it earlier. These are important games, and you could say, and this could be obvious, that these are Jalen Hurts' most important games of his life
Oh, yeah.
coming up. This Washington game was very important because you wanted to get him back on track. You want to get the Eagles back on track. He didn't play against the Jets. It was a bye week, but before that, the awful performance he he had against the Giants, and I'm sure he's going to be changing things, whether whoever the head coach is, because he does not want to lose to the Giants again. He wants to show this team, the fan base, that he really is the guy. And going to Nick Sirianni, what I liked hearing during getting ready for the game and in his press conference, stuff like that, he told Nick Sirianni to coach him hard. He wants to be
Yeah.
coached hard. He wants that force to really get him going. And you go to the Eagles rush game. Jalen Hurts obviously rushing for 2 touchdowns, and he now has the record, the franchise record we posted on our story for the
Right.
most rushing touchdowns in a single season. And Miles Sanders got going 131 yards. And not only did Miles Sanders get going, Jordan Howard came back with 69 rushing yards. I mean, it's like, I believe it was from week 7 on. They finally hear the chants in the
Yeah.
stadium. They finally run the ball. But does that put this team in a hard spot? Because the offensive line, obviously, if you run, there's not as much pressure as there is holding on to their guy when Jalen Hurts is in the pocket. He's searching for an open receiver. Is that sort of going to mess up the rhythm of this team? Should they stick to one side, or should they sort of follow a more balanced route?
Yeah, I think they remind me right now a lot of the Ravens, just less talented. They have a great offensive line. Mailata's been great. Lane Johnson's been great. I know they have a couple guys on the COVID list, but Dickerson's been improving all season long. I think when you look at the Ravens, Lamar Jackson's an MVP candidate every year with his rushing ability. They're well coached, well balanced. I mean, we're talking about guys like Devontae Freeman, who I thought were washed and out of the league for like 2-3 years. And all of a sudden, Devontae Freeman's excelling behind that offensive line in that run heavy offense in Baltimore. So I compare him a lot to to that team because they're using their strengths more, I guess, aggressively later in the season that we've seen than early on. They're just not a high caliber throwing team. It's not saying Jalen Hurts can't be that because he's through 20 to 26. When he's asked to do it, he does it at a good enough level. But I'm not saying he's not Patrick Mahomes. He's not going to go back there and throw off his spot or cross body and things like that, throwing 40 times a game. It's just not what his game is. And I think over the season, the Eagles have recognized that. They're pumping Jordan Howard. They're pumping Miles Sanders. The holes that Sanders was running through and Howard, too, were just gaping holes. And that's credit to the offensive line. I like the play calling. The play calling has been a lot better. You look at Hollywood Brown in Baltimore, you kind of look at him compared to Devontae Smith. Both guys young, star power possibly in future years. But again, Hollywood's a deep threat that doesn't get too many deep balls, more crossers, just because Lamar's not going to air it out all the time. So I like where they're at now. Continue to run the football at a high rate because it's working for you. And moving forward, I don't see why this team can't make the playoffs. It's a team that the defense is going to be the question mark for me. I think the offensive scheme, they're a good offensive team that they stick to their game plan with the rushing attack, and Hurts can do enough offensively to get the job done and put up points when need be, especially with his legs. But the question will be, if this team wants to make the playoffs, I think to eliminate any headaches, they have to win out the rest of the way, even that Cowboys game. And then we're going to be scoreboard watching if they lose one because you'll have to look at the tiebreakers if they can only win 9 games instead of 10. But defensively is going to be the question. Can Darius Slay, can Fletcher Cox and that D-line continue to get pressure on the quarterback, make enough plays, force turnovers to get this team into the playoffs? So if everybody wants to know where I'm looking the rest of the way, 3 games left, defense is going to be the key for me. Can they just continue to hold teams to these 14 to 20 point range in order to win? I mean, they're winning close games. I know last week's game or Tuesday's game wasn't that close. I mean, 10 points early on. If they don't give up those 10 points, it looks a lot better of a result than it really was. But they're not going to score 40 or 50. I mean, they've done it a few times, but that's not their MO. So just continue to play strong defense. This team can get to the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely. And you go to Miles Sanders' performance. I know earlier in the season, you and a few other people were um, thinking ahead of Miles Sanders for next season,
Yeah.
that he's not on the team. Has this performance sort of changed your view on him, or do you still think it's time to move on from Miles Sanders
I
in the
think it's still
upcoming
time to
season?
move on. I'm not going to give him, the bag, so to speak, because at the end of the day, I just don't think that running backs are a huge necessity as far as being able to pay. First of all, pay. You look at Ezekiel Elliott right now. He's a perfect example. Ezekiel Elliott right now just looks like he's worn out. He's worn down. Tony Pollard looks like the more explosive running back. Not to say Miles Sanders is a bad player. I never thought he was a bad player. I think people talk about him more highly than what his performances have shown. The injuries that he's battled with the ankle this year too. When the offensive line is playing as well as it has, and the holes are that big, he shows the ability to get out in open space and make plays. But he's a guy still that I don't think I like to see him break more tackles. I wish he had a little bit more burst and top end speed. I think he's athletic as all hell. Obviously he's an NFL running back, but when you talk about looking in the draft, the guys are putting up numbers. Look at guys like Najee Harris, and you even look back further, like David Montgomery, a third round pick, Alvin Kamara, a third round pick. Like, you need to use your money to positions that are more necessary. When you look at a cornerback, a shutdown cornerback, or edge pass rusher, I'm not going to give Miles Sanders a contract extension here because he's going to command a good amount of money on the open market that I'm just not willing to pay. I think Jordan Howard can do what Miles Sanders does. Maybe doesn't have that athleticism when you talk about getting pass catching, maybe getting to the outside quicker, but he's still a serviceable running back, and he's literally was on the practice squad, and it'll save the Eagles a lot of money in the long run. But I don't know if you agree with that, because you talk about is he's a good player. I'm not saying I want to cut him. I guess it just depends on how much money the Eagles are going to have to pay him, right?
It does. It does depend on how much he's asking for, but what's dragging me into it is how young he is, and the spurts of just you see it. You see how good of a running back he can be.
Right.
It hasn't been consistent, and that's in part the Eagles' fault for not using him as much earlier on in the season. He got injured too, and then all of a sudden they start using their running backs like that. So I am curious to see how the Eagles are going to handle that situation, but it's definitely not at the top of their list of concerns going into the season. Max, you mentioned you wouldn't use your draft pick to draft a quarterback. I think I'm comfortable saying that.
Yeah.
However, you do have 3 first-round picks now, which you can use in a trade for, like you said, a cornerback, a player that you won't be able to find in the draft. I have more of a Christmas question for you, since it is, our last show before Christmas. Max, is it for those who bought Jalen Hurts jerseys for a loved one, like someone, is it too soon? Should they not give that gift on Christmas? I asking for a friend.
Well, listen, I think the big thing here is, for me, I'm thinking Hurts is the man next year, so I definitely think you give that gift. But you and I both know, and are big sports fans here in Philadelphia, we know how Howie Roseman, how his clock ticks. Once it gets to a certain point where he has even the slightest thought of, hey, Aaron Rodgers is available, I'm going to make that splash trade. And he could think we wake up one morning and say Hurts is the guy, and then he gets a phone call from the Packers GM, and they start to having discussions. I really think, and even if this does happen, Christmas question aside, that is literally something that I feel like could happen. Howie Roseman just wakes up one morning come this summer or this spring and says, you know what? He gets a phone call on the phone with the Packers GM or the Seahawks GM, and discussions can go down quickly. I mean, that's what happens in the NFL. So to answer your question, holiday season. Look, he just had a great win on Tuesday. He's probably going to have another solid win on Sunday, we hope. So, in the holiday spirit, worst case scenario is you just go out, you buck up a little bit and spend another $100 on the Devontae Smith jersey or something like that.
I'll keep the gift receipt.
Exactly.
But going into our final topic, and we touched on it earlier, the playoff hopes for the Eagles. Very important game for that tonight, Thursday night football kicking off soon.
Go Titans, baby.
Yeah, if you're an Eagles fan, you root for the Titans. At this point, you pretty much root against any NFC team. The Titans against the 49ers. 49ers pretty much locked into that 6th spot, but still helps if they lose. I know the Eagles' percentage chance is 31 right now, thanks to that last win, but definitely will improve if they can finish 4-0. Not sure if this is a team that in the beginning of the season you would think would go on a 4-0 run. But they if they want to make things easy for themselves, that's what they're going to have to do.
That Washington, or that I should say, that Cincinnati 49er game 2 weeks ago bothers me so much, because Cincinnati had an opportunity to really, obviously take that victory at home against the 49ers, and they ended up losing it. But that was because, going forward, the Niners then last week played the Falcons. The Falcons are just not that good of a team. the Niners end up winning that one easily. But I think that Cincinnati game is going to bother me, especially if there's tiebreakers involved with record-wise, because the 49ers have that head-to-head win against the Eagles earlier this season. The Saints also going down to Tampa and shutting out Tom Brady for the first time in 15 years. That's just incredible in itself. So there's definitely some annoying things happening. Monday Night Football, you look at Chicago, Minnesota. We were pulling for Chicago to beat the Vikings just to give them another loss. Obviously, it didn't happen. Chicago's just a weak opponent. So those teams, I think, when you look at the 49ers, who are probably, at this point, I would say safely in the playoffs, barring any drastic changes. And you also have the two teams I would look at moving forward here, outside the Washington football team, is the Saints, and also obviously they're the Vikings as well, because those two teams are going to be nipping at the heels with these last few weeks. But the Vikings schedule is pretty hard, I think.
Yeah, the Rams, Packers, and Bears.
Yeah. So it's going to be tough for them to be able to pull out victories. The Rams are, firepower offensively. So we'll see. I think that Eagles have a good shot based on their schedule.
Yeah, a situation us Eagles fans are all familiar with, looking to see how the Vikings do. Being behind on the bubble, one behind the Vikings. The Vikings have that 7th spot right now with a 7-7 record. Let's hope they drop both the Rams and the Packers matchups at least. Will definitely help out the Eagles.
Yeah.
But that's going to wrap up this Week 15 recap of the Bird's Nest. Happy Festivus for Seinfeld fans out there, and an early Merry Christmas to you all. Thank you guys for tuning in.